have to save her. Izuku was panicking about the overhaul raid. His demons had come back to haunt him. Would the help of his best friend help? Or would it come back to ant him as well? This is an alternate timeline starting around week Prio. Chapter 4, Midoriya-kun, are you there? A yell from outside of the door blares in, waking up Izuku. He sits up quickly and notices a drooling Ochako laying next to him. He looks at his TV and sees the message asking if they were still watching. Crap. Izuku thinks to himself as he gets out of his bed and stumbles to the door. He opens it and sees Iida in his school uniform. Midoriya-kun, we're gonna be late. Get ready quick. Iida says, chopping his hands. Wait, I'm on house arrest, I don't get to go to school. Izuku responds, slamming the door in his face. I forgot, I apologize, Mr. House Arrest. He hears Iida yell through the door. Izuku smirks to himself as he turns back to see a yawning Ochako in his bed. Where am I? She mutters as she looks around the room. Morning, Uraraka-san, Izuku mutters while waving. Deku-kun, Ochako questions, rubbing her eyes. That's me, Izuku responds awkwardly. Why was I asleep here? What happened? Ochako asks as she slowly sits up straight. Yesterday we were watching a movie and I guess we passed out. Izuku responds as he walks to his bed and shuffles through the sheets. He finds his phone and checks the time. It's only 6:45. Izuku mutters to Ochako, who is half asleep. Iida-kun must have meant we wouldn't be 10 minutes early when he said we'd be late. He continues as he glances over to Ochako, who is about to fall back asleep while sitting up. Wanna sleep? Izuku asks her. She slowly nods as she lets herself fall back, but Izuku wraps his arms around her, basically hugging her. Don't just fall back, I know you're tired, but that's a bit much. Izuku says, smiling as Ochako is startled and blushes. Why, yeah, sorry, she says with a small giggle as Izuku lets go of her. And no, Ochako says, grabbing Izuku's hand. Izuku blushes. We can lay together, right? You know, it's cold, some warmth won't hurt, Ochako says nervously. Izuku nods slowly and they both lay down while looking at each other. This is normal, right? Ochako says, staring at Izuku. I think, we're friends, right? Friends can sleep together when it's cold. Izuku says, smiling a bit. It was September, both knew it wasn't too cold out but they didn't care. Yeah, Ochako responds lightly. A silence takes over the room. Well, I'm gonna try and sleep, thank you, Ochako says to him. Okay, well, I'm gonna go work out, see you later, Izuku says, getting out of bed as Ochako rolls over and falls asleep. Izuku walks to the door of the dorms and the security bot goes off. It quickly stops and Izuku turns back to see his predecessor. All Might, Izuku says, surprised. Hey kid, I heard about your house arrest, is everything going alright? All Might asks, walking to Izuku. Yeah, just wasn't feeling so hot and forgot to go back to class. Izuku responds, nervously chuckling. All Might shakes his head. Do you mind using your room as a workout space then? Can't slack on your progression. All Might says, making Izuku nod. Yeah, we can use it, Izuku responds, smiling. Okay then, let's go, we can figure it out when we're there. All Might says, walking toward the stairs. Izuku nods and starts to follow All Might before remembering who's in his bed. Oh god, Izuku thinks to himself as All Might reaches for his door. Wait, Izuku says urgently, making All Might look back. What? All Might asks, confused. I wanna talk about One for All, Izuku mutters. Save it for when we're in your room, All Might says, opening the door. He walks in and Izuku slowly follows behind. All Might stops at Izuku's bed and slowly turns back toward him. Why is Uraraka Shoujo in your bed? All Might asks almost casually. Well, it's a long story, Izuku says awkwardly. Are you two in a relationship finally? All Might asks while backing up away from the bed. Izuku shakes his head no quickly. Then why is she here? All Might asks, crossing his arms. Last night we watched a movie and passed out, then I woke up this morning and she was just there, Izuku says, panicking. Did she wake up? All Might responds. Well yeah, but she was too tired so I told her to go back to sleep, Izuku admits while blushing. All Might pats on Izuku's shoulder and smiles. Good job, kid, he says as he walks to the door and opens it. We can find another spot to talk about One for All, he says, walking out. Izuku sighs in relief and follows All Might out of the room. Ochako's eyes shoot open and she releases a breath she'd been holding. All Might, why was he here? What's One for All? She says to herself as she gets up and starts to panic. If I just ignore it, it doesn't matter, right? Yeah, just stay calm. Ochako stopped talking to herself as she looks over to the door to see Izuku looking at her. Uraraka-san, Izuku says, confused. Hey Deku-kun, how's it going? she says awkwardly as she leans against his desk. I came back to grab my raincoat because of the rain. How long have you been up? He asks as he walks to his small coat rack. Not long. She responds quickly. You didn't hear anything right. Izuku asks knowing the answer. Well, yeah, what's a one for all? Ochako asks making Izuku's heart drop. Well it's my quirk. Izuku says nervously giggling. I thought you just had super strength. Ochako says confused. Midoriya Shonen, what's ta? All Might stops talking once he sees Ochako talking to Izuku. Uraraka Shoujo. All Might says, All Might sensei, hi. Ochako responds awkwardly. So yeah she knows about one for all. Izuku says quickly. All Might twitches a bit. Of course she does. All Might says sighing. Uraraka Shoujo come to my office with Midoriya Shonen and I. All Might says turning away and walking into the hall. Yeah let me get my shoes. Ochako says running toward the door. Izuku sighs and walks out of the room to follow All Might. After a few minutes the three of them are grouped inside of All Might's office. So, one for all is my quirk and it has a backstory. Izuku says to Ochako as he sits next to her. What do you mean backstory? Ochako says confused. Well you see, this quirk hasn't always been mine. Izuku says awkwardly. Someone else had your quirk. Ochako asks a bit nervous. Yeah, All Might gave the quirk to me. Izuku says making Ochako go silent. Izuku goes on to explain one for all in its past as Ochako watches in awe. Once he finishes he looks at her for an answer. So, Izuku says, wow. Ochako mutters surprised at what she just heard. So that's why Bakugo-kun called you a quirkless loser. Ochako says, and why he said you had a borrowed power. And why he saw, you can stop now. Izuku interrupts her. All Might smirks and nods. Yes, so Midoriya Shonen is my successor. Remember not to tell anyone though otherwise they will be in danger. All Might says to Ochako. So am I in danger? Ochako asks raising an eyebrow. Well yeah, All Might says making Izuku face palm. Don't worry about it, I'll make sure you don't get hurt. Izuku says making Ochako look at him quickly. I promise I won't let you get hurt. Izuku says smiling and making Ochako blush. You don't have to protect me Deku-kun, remember we're both gonna become heroes. Ochako says smiling. Izuku smiles back and nods. All Might pats Izuku's shoulder and leans in to whisper in his ear. Treasure this relationship. I made the mistake on not finding myself a wife. Don't follow in my footsteps. All Might whispers. Izuku blushes and looks at All Might with angry look. Don't say that. Izuku says embarrassed. What happened? Ochako asks while tilting her head. Izuku shakes his head. Nothing. Izuku says. Let's go back to the dorms before we get into trouble. Izuku says chopping his hand like Iida. Ochako smiles and nods. Yeah let's go. Ochako says turning around and walking out of the room. Don't do anything stupid Midoriya Shonen. Keep her close I can tell she cares. All Might says. Izuku nods. I'll do my best All Might. Izuku says walking out of the room. The two teens get back to the dorms and Aizawa is waiting for them. So where did you two decide to go? Aizawa asks startling both of the students. All Might wanted to talk to us. Ochako says. True. Izuku backs up. Well I wanted to talk about letting you two join us in the mission for Eri. I still want you two to come even though you're on house arrest. Aizawa says making both Izuku and Ochako nodding. So you'll still join us? Aizawa asks. Yes sir. Izuku and Ochako say in unison. Alright, mission's in a week at 10:30 a.m. Be ready or you'll regret it. Aizawa says while walking out of the dorms. Izuku and Ochako look at each other and smile. Redemption. Ochako asks Izuku who can't stop smiling. Yeah. Izuku says punching a fist into the air.